By 1982, horror had exploded into all corners of cinema. The slasher boom was in full swing, but the year also brought haunted houses, European nightmares, and low-budget oddities that pushed the genre in strange new directions. This was the year where isolated islands hid hulking killers, college dorms dripped with blood, and even nightmares themselves seemed to crawl into reality. From Italian Gothic chills to Canadian slashers and American creature features, the variety was staggering and unforgettable. Tonight, we're diving into 1982 to look at 10 overlooked horror films that prove the second year of the decade was every bit as daring, bloody, and imaginative as fans could hope for. Parasite, 1982. In a bleak post-apocalyptic future, science has gone too far. A young researcher named Paul Dean flees a government syndicate after creating a grotesque parasite that now lives inside his own body. To make matters worse, another specimen escapes into the world, threatening anyone who crosses its path. As Paul searches for a cure, he's hunted by mercenaries and stalked by the very monster he helped bring to life. Directed by Charles Band, Parasite is a mix of sci-fi dystopia and creature horror, shot in 3D to capitalize on the early 80s revival of the format. Robert Glaudini stars as Paul, the tormented scientist on the run, while Demi Moore makes one of her earliest film appearances as a small-town survivor who reluctantly joins the fight. The film leans heavily on atmosphere. Barren landscapes, neon-lit hideouts, and grim industrial ruins set the stage for its parasitic terror. Practical effects by Stan Winston give the monsters their slimy, grotesque presence, turning even the smallest encounters into moments of shock. What makes Parasite stand out is its combination of exploitation grit and sci-fi ambition. It's low budget but ambitious, with its mix of body horror, mutant creatures, and post-apocalyptic styling making it a VHS-era staple. While critics were dismissive, Parasite thrived in video stores, its 3D gimmick and striking cover art pulling in curious renters. Today it's remembered not just as an early Charles Band production, but also as a showcase of Stan Winston's effects work and a glimpse at Demi Moore before she became a household name. Nightbeast, 1982. When a spaceship crashes in a small Maryland town, the locals are unprepared for what's inside. A reptilian alien emerges from the wreckage, armed with laser weapons and an insatiable appetite for destruction. As the bodies pile up, a sheriff and a handful of survivors struggle to stop the creature before it wipes the town off the map. Directed by Don Dohler, Nightbeast is a no-budget sci-fi horror that became a staple of regional filmmaking. The cast includes Tom Griffith as Sheriff Cinder, leading the charge against the extraterrestrial menace, with Anne Frith and Jamie Zemurel rounding out the human side of the fight. What the film lacks in budget, it makes up for in enthusiasm. The alien is brought to life with rubber-suit practical effects and laser-blasting pyrotechnics that give the attacks a pulpy energy. The film also features an early music score contribution from J.J. Abrams, adding another layer of curiosity to its legacy. The charm of Nightbeast lies in its scrappy ambition. Shot in backyards and local neighborhoods, it leans on creativity and heart rather than resources, giving it a distinct personality that big-budget creature features often miss. While it never reached theaters nationwide, Nightbeast thrived on late-night TV and VHS rentals, where its mix of gore, camp, and sci-fi mayhem made it unforgettable for fans who stumbled across it. It remains a cult favorite, celebrated as a true outsider horror film that turned limitations into a badge of honor. The Slayer, 1982. Two couples travel to a remote island getaway, hoping for a peaceful escape. But artist Kay, plagued by recurring nightmares of a monstrous figure, quickly feels unease settling over the desolate landscape. As a storm traps them on the island, her fears take shape, and one by one, her friends begin to die in ways that eerily match her dreams. Directed by J.S. Cardone, The Slayer is a slow-burn slasher with supernatural undertones, blending psychological dread with bloody payoffs. Sarah Kendall stars as Kay, bringing an intensity to the role of a woman unsure whether she's losing her mind or truly haunted. The supporting cast includes Frederick Flynn, Carol Cottonbrook, and Alan McRae, all playing characters caught in the nightmare's web. The island setting is one of the film's greatest strengths. Abandoned houses, rocky shorelines, and pounding surf create a constant sense of isolation. When the kills arrive, they're brutal and imaginative, delivered with practical effects that linger just long enough to shock without losing their eerie edge. What makes the Slayer distinctive is its blending of slasher mechanics with dreamlike horror. It isn't just about a masked killer. It's about the possibility of nightmares manifesting into reality. That angle gives the film a surreal quality, reinforced by its grim pacing and ominous atmosphere. Though overlooked on release, The Slayer gained cult attention in the VHS market, remembered especially for its unsettling dream logic and the infamous beach house death scene. Today, it stands as one of the era's more unusual slashers. Part psychological study, part supernatural shocker. Death Screams, 1982. In a small southern town, a local fair brings together teens, couples, and townsfolk for a night of fun. But when the lights go down and the crowds disperse, something far more sinister begins. A mysterious killer stalks the shadows, targeting the young and unwary in brutal fashion. The community's quiet riverbanks and backroads turn into hunting grounds, and by the time morning comes, the night has left more than screams behind. Directed by David Nelson, Death Screams is a regional slasher that captures the raw, unpolished energy of early 80s horror. The cast includes Susan Kiger, a former Playboy playmate, and Martin Tucker, giving the film both local charm and a mix of amateur and seasoned performances that enhance its offbeat appeal. The kills, while sometimes rough around the edges, are staged with creativity, including rope traps, knives, and riverside ambushes. The film also isn't shy about gore, leaning into the exploitation edge that helped it find life on VHS shelves. What makes Death Screams memorable is its atmosphere. The southern small-town setting feels authentic, from the fairgrounds to the lazy riverside, giving the film a texture that big studio slashers often lacked. The sense that horror can creep into even the most ordinary places makes it stick. Though it never reached wide release, Death Screams became a staple of late-night rentals and bootleg trades, its lurid title and striking VHS cover drawing in curious fans. Today it survives as one of those scrappy slashers that may not play by the rules, but delivers enough blood, sweat, and southern grit to earn its cult following. The Dorm That Dripped Blood, 1982. On a college campus during Christmas break, a handful of students stay behind to help clean out a condemned dormitory. The quiet task quickly turns into a nightmare as an unseen killer begins stalking them through the empty halls and shadowy basements. One by one, the volunteers are picked off in grisly fashion, turning the abandoned dorm into a slaughterhouse. Directed by Stephen Carpenter and Jeffrey Obrow, The Dorm That Dripped Blood is a prime example of the early 80s slasher wave. The cast features future stars in early roles, including Daphne Zuniga, later of The Fly 2 and Spaceballs. Lori Lipinski and Steven Sachs round out the core group of students caught in the carnage. The film leans on atmosphere more than polish. The dark, echoing dorm setting creates a claustrophobic tone, while the practical effects bring a grim, gritty edge to the kills. Baseball bats, drills, and blunt instruments replace elaborate setups, keeping the violence raw and unsettling. What gives the film lasting power is its downbeat tone and infamous ending. Instead of going for slick thrills, it embraces a grim, almost nihilistic streak that sets it apart from more mainstream slashers of the era. Released under multiple titles, including Pranks, the film's raw atmosphere and grim violence made it stand out on VHS shelves. It remains a cult staple for slasher fans who appreciate their horror uncompromising and drenched in shadows. Humongous, 1982. A group of young friends sets out on a boating trip, only to be stranded after a crash leaves them marooned on a fog-shrouded island. At first the place seems deserted, but they soon learn it hides a terrifying secret. Years earlier, a violent assault led to the birth of a deformed child, raised in isolation and grown into a hulking killer. Now fully grown, the monstrous figure stalks the island, turning the survivors' fight, to escape into a desperate struggle against a near-inhuman foe. Directed by Paul Lynch, best known for Prom Night, Humongous combines Canadian slasher grit with a backwoods monster setup. The cast includes Janet Julian, David Wallace, and Janet Baldwin, all playing teens whose carefree getaway collapses into bloody terror. The performances give just enough personality to make the hunt across the island tense and memorable. The setting is one of the film's strongest assets. The dense forests, rocky shorelines, and abandoned mansion create a gothic isolation, while the night scenes drench the island in shadow. When the creature appears, the practical effects lean into brute force. Kills are messy, sudden, and brutal. What makes Humongous stand out is the atmosphere. It's less about slick kills and more about the dread of being hunted by something unnatural in an environment you can't escape. The pacing is slower than some slashers, but it builds into a final confrontation that pays off the island's ominous lore. Humongous never matched the notoriety of Paul Lynch's Prom Night, but it carved its own reputation as a bleak, creature-driven slasher. Fans of survival horror embraced it for its atmosphere and isolated setting, making it a staple of late-night VHS marathons. The Living Dead Girl, La Morte Vivante, 1982. In the French countryside, toxic chemicals dumped into a crypt disturbed the grave of a young woman named Catherine. When she rises from the dead, she isn't a mindless ghoul but a tragic figure, alive yet cursed, with an unquenchable thirst for blood. Her childhood friend Helene discovers her, and, torn between loyalty and fear, tries to protect her from the outside world. But Catherine's hunger only grows, leaving a trail of victims and heartbreak. Directed by Jean Rollin, The Living Dead Girl mixes gothic horror with Rollin's signature dreamlike atmosphere. Françoise Blanchard delivers a haunting performance as Catherine, her pale presence both ethereal and monstrous. Marina Piero co-stars as Hélène, embodying the doomed bond of friendship that drives the film's emotional core. The film is drenched in eerie visuals, crumbling chateaux, misty graveyards, and sunlit countryside twisted into a stage for horror. The violence is shocking in its intimacy, with Catherine's attacks captured in slow, unsettling detail that contrasts with her childlike sadness. What makes The Living Dead Girl linger is its mood. It isn't just about bloodshed, it's about love, loss, and the tragedy of a life stolen and returned in monstrous form. Rollin's unique sensibility gives the film a poetic edge that sets it apart from other zombie tales of the era. Over time, it has become one of Rollin's most celebrated works, embraced by fans who value horror that is both visceral and strangely beautiful. It endures as a haunting fusion of the macabre and the melancholy. Superstition, 1982. When a quiet New England house becomes the site of repeated murders, a minister and his family move in, hoping to cleanse it of its dark reputation. But what they don't realize is that the house sits on cursed ground, haunted by the vengeful spirit of a witch executed centuries earlier. As the curse awakens, ordinary life twists into supernatural terror, with death striking in gruesome and unpredictable ways. Directed by James W. Robertson, Superstition blends haunted house chills with slasher-style violence, creating a hybrid that feels both gothic and modern. James Houghton leads the cast as Reverend Thompson, with Albert Selmy and Lynn Carlin providing strong supporting turns as townsfolk tied to the house's grim legacy. The film is remembered for its brutal death sequences. Victims are dispatched with everything from saw blades to kitchen tools, each attack staged with graphic effects that push the film into video store infamy. The witch's presence is felt throughout, her laughter, her shadow, her grip on the house, until she finally manifests in shocking form. What sets Superstition apart is its balance of atmosphere and excess. It takes the classic ghost story framework and injects it with the bloody energy of early 80s horror, resulting in a film that feels at once old-fashioned and daringly violent. Ignored by critics at the time, it became a VHS favorite for fans drawn to its grisly reputation and eerie cover art. Today, Superstition endures as one of the standout haunted house horrors of the decade, remembered for its relentless pacing and uncompromising scares. Visiting Hours, 1982. After a televised debate where journalist Deborah Ballin takes a firm stand on women's rights, she attracts the attention of a violent stalker. Brutally attacked in her own home, she survives and is rushed to the hospital. But her nightmare is only beginning. The attacker isn't finished, and as Deborah struggles to recover, the hospital itself becomes the hunting ground for a relentless killer. Directed by Jean-Claude Lord, Visiting Hours is a Canadian slasher that leans into suspense and atmosphere as much as gore. Lee Grant stars as Deborah, bringing strength and vulnerability to a role that grounds the film in realism. Michael Ironside is chilling as the disturbed killer, delivering one of his most unsettling performances, while William Shatner appears in a smaller but memorable role as Deborah's network producer. The sterile hospital setting gives the film a unique edge. Bright hallways and bustling wards become spaces of dread once the killer begins stalking them. The tension builds not just through the attacks, but through the constant unease that nowhere feels safe. What makes Visiting Hours endure is its cast. Grant and Ironside's dynamic elevates the material, turning what could have been a standard stalk and slash into something far more intense. The cat-and-mouse pacing keeps the danger ever present, while the performances give it weight. While it didn't gain the mainstream recognition of other 1982 slashers, Visiting Hours thrived on cable and VHS, remembered for its strong leads and unnerving realism. It remains one of the decade's more distinctive thrillers, balancing exploitation with a surprising amount of gravitas. Alone in the Dark, 1982. When a power outage plunges a city into darkness, a psychiatric hospital's most dangerous patients seize their chance to escape. Led by a group of unhinged killers, they descend on the home of Dr. Dan Potter, a new psychiatrist they've irrationally decided to blame for the disappearance of their previous doctor. What follows is a siege of escalating tension as Potter and his family fight to survive against unpredictable maniacs armed with brutality and cunning. Directed by Jack Shoulder, Alone in the Dark stands out as one of the first slasher films to feature killers working together as a group rather than a single-masked figure. The cast is stacked with genre heavyweights. Donald Pleasence plays the eccentric head of the hospital, Martin Landau is chilling as a religious zealot turned murderer, and Jack Palance brings menace as the group's calculating leader. Dwight Schultz, later known for the A-Team, stars as Dr. Potter, the unlikely target of their madness. The film balances suspense and violence, with the killers each bringing their own twisted personalities and methods to the siege. The suburban home invasion setting contrasts sharply with the larger citywide blackout, giving the attacks a sense of isolation despite the chaos beyond. What makes Alone in the Dark memorable is its blend of strong performances and its inventive twist on the slasher formula. It plays more like a survival thriller than a body count movie, keeping viewers on edge with the unpredictability of its villains. It never had the profile of the decade's marquee horror films, but Alone in the Dark earned lasting cult status through its atmosphere and powerhouse cast. It remains a sharp reminder of how fragile safety can feel once the lights go out. And that's our journey through 1982. A year where horror showed off its range, from dreamlike tragedies to down and dirty slashers. These films might not have topped box office charts, but they left their mark through atmosphere, audacity, and the kind of scares that live on long after the credits roll. They're the titles that thrived on VHS shelves, late-night television, and whispered recommendations among fans. Proof that horror's true gems often live just beyond the spotlight. For even more 80s discoveries, visit our online VHS store at ejectvhs.com. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.